His best blessings and salutations and peace on our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the most noble of all the prophets that have come to this world, sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah. We all bear witness that there is no God except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we ascribe no partners to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wa anna Muhammadan Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we bear witness that our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the messenger of Allah, the final messenger of Allah, the best of examples for all humanity. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to us in the Holy Quran, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن رَسُولٍ. We do not send prophets إِلَّا بِلِسَانِ قَوْمٍ, except that they speak and that they teach in the language of the people that they have been sent to. لِيُبَيِّنَ لَهُمْ, so that they may clarify matters for the people to whom they have been sent. Sadaqallahu al-Alim. My respected elders, my respected brothers and sisters, people of knowledge who are amongst us here, it is the blessed day of Jummah. It is a Jummah that is bookended by two events. We have seen over the past weekend the inauguration and the launching of the Museum of African American History in the United States of America. And it is a Jummah that comes a few weeks before the people of the United States of America are faced with a choice in an election that takes place in November. The one speaks to us of a history, including a history of Muslims in this country, and the other one speaks to us about a future, including the future of Muslims in this United States of America. And therefore, it is important that we call to mind when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also tells us in the Holy Quran, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. We have invested honor and dignity in the progeny of Adam, the first creation. May Allah be pleased with him, and may Allah put peace and blessings upon him. That every human being has been invested with honor. It is an honor that must remain inviolable. It cannot be violated. It must be a dignity that must always be respected and cherished. It cannot be violated. And therefore, whatever it is that we look back on, and whatever it is that we look forward to, it must always have in mind the honor and the dignity of every human creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of Allah the Most High and the Sublime. And whatever differences we have, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala further tells us in the Quran that amongst the signs of Allah, amongst the signs of the existence of Allah, the majesty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the holiness of God, is the fact that Allah has created the heavens and the earth. Allah does not only say that we have created the heavens and the earth, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes further to say, as well as the diversity of your languages and your colors. Verily, in this diversity is a sign for those who have knowledge. For those who are ignorant, the diversity of our languages, the diversity of our colors, the diversity of our human existence is a threat. In Allah's calculation, the fact that we are created diversely is a celebration of Allah's existence and the majesty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For the ignorant, the diversity of our creation, the number of languages we speak, the number of ways we worship Allah, the number of colors that exists amongst human beings, the number of ethnicities and differences that exist amongst us, for the ignorant, they see their superiority over the others. For those who are imbued with knowledge, they see it as a sign of the unlimitedness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the unlimitedness of the variation and the diversity of human beings. And it is important for us in this moment, when we look back at the history of Islam and Muslims in this country, and we look forward to an election that is coming, it is absolutely crucial in this period, my respected brothers and sisters, of political ferment in the US, that we face a number of choices, but that must always be based in our understanding of the essential izzah, the essential haram, honor and dignity of human beings. And we must always understand that the diversity is not a subtraction of honor and dignity, but that the diversity is in fact a manifestation of the honor and dignity with which we all have been invested, even those amongst us who sin. So obviously there is this election that is coming up, and on the face of it, it is an election between parties and between candidates, personalities and politics. But I would say that at a moment like this, especially in the year 2016, it is also an election. It's also a choice between what we understand to be the worth of human beings, and particularly the worth of black lives in this country, because nothing could have illustrated to us more than the past few weeks about how cheap black lives may have deemed to be measured in this country. And therefore, on the obvious surface, it's parties and candidates. Below that, it is about whether every life is considered worthy in this country, or whether some lives, particularly those with darker skins, are considered less worthy or unworthy of preserving their honor and their dignity. It is a moment that this diversity that Allah has created us with sees the disparagement of those who speak Spanish in this country, Hispanics. It is a moment also when brought to our consciousness is the phenomenon that is increasing of Islamophobia, how there is the glorious religion of Islam that is being demonized, and those who follow it, attempts are being made to discriminate as well as to stereotype and to see us as a security issue rather than as a manifestation of a glorious religion of an Abrahamic faith. And it is also a period in which is debated, for example, how the United States of America will deal with parts of the world where Islam is a majority. What's the foreign policy challenges that come up? And therefore, I will say to you, my dear brothers and sisters, that the choice in November seems to be more than a choice between parties and candidates. It may be more of a referendum than it is an election. A referendum about human worth, a referendum about humane policies at home and abroad, a referendum about what are the finest values by which this country must define itself, a referendum about the character of the nation who call themselves Americans. What are we? Are we intrinsically a harsh nation, or are Americans intrinsically an accepting and merciful and compassionate nation and force in this world? It may even be an election or a referendum that determines the character of Muslim coexistence in this country into the future. It asks a fundamental question of Muslims. Who are we? What is our identity? What are the competing identities and how do we make them complementary? Because at this point, there are some who want us to choose between being Muslim and being American, and who put forward the thesis that being Muslim must mean being non-American. And sometimes there are those who may think that being American does not allow us also to be Muslim. And so the challenge that we face in a referendum like this is to answer the question of our identity. And as we dealt with it in South Africa, we believe that it is not impossible. In fact, it is great to be South African Muslim. It is to be both belonging to a nation and belonging to an ummah, a global community of believers. And so those are the fundamental questions, other than the entertainment that comes from debates and discussions on television. These are the existential questions that we need to ask ourselves. As Muslims, we also have to ask ourselves, where are we? And I say this only because I have encountered many Muslims who physically may be in America, but spiritually somewhere in the Middle East, somewhere on the subcontinent of India, Pakistan and Bangladesh, somewhere spiritually in Africa. They make their money here, but their hearts are somewhere else. And therefore, we must answer the question, not just who are we, but also where are we? And how do we harmonize it? It's wonderful. We in South Africa have been there for 350 years. We still have the best, for example, of Malay foods. But we don't feel in our hearts that we are members of Indonesia or citizens of Malaysia. We are culturally connected because we add our culture to the diversity of America. But we don't have our bodies here and our hearts somewhere else. More concerned about issues there and divorced from issues here. In some cases, Muslims would believe that Palestinian lives matter more than black lives in America. Lives must have equal value. We must be concerned about Palestinians, but what is the possible hypocrisy about being so concerned about Palestinians and have no compassion for black lives when they are shot down in the United States of America? And so we must answer those questions, and fundamentally, we must answer the question, why are we here? How did we come here? For some who are here for 400, 500 years, we are here against our will. We are the descendants of slaves who were ripped out of Africa and brought here to build this country against our will. For others, we migrated here because there was more freedom here, more rights here, more democracy here, more opportunity here than there would have been in the countries that we fled from. Because there we faced dictatorships, there we faced the infringement on rights, there we could not live ourselves out as women sometimes, there we could not enjoy freedom of speech, freedom of dress, freedom of worship, freedom of being. And so we sought a new life on this side, and we were given often that new life. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not make accidents with where you are born. If you are born here, and if you have moved here, you owe a debt of responsibility. You cannot earn a living here and owe nothing to society other than your taxes. So we are here as a service. Some would have classified, like they did in South Africa, not a Darul Islam, but a Darul Da'wah, a place to give the message, to manifest the beauty of our faith. But you cannot manifest the beauty of your faith if you want to turn where you live into a little Pakistan or a little Jordan. Because then we are marketing a culture and not a set of values and not a set. Because there will always be cultural disconnect between our past and our present. Because you can't force Americans to eat the kind of tripe and trotters like we eat in Africa. But we can convince them that our values are the same. That we all love dignity. We all love freedom. We all love equality. We all love peace. We may not find each other on the cultural terrain, and we add that to American society, but we will find each other on the values-based terrain. And so, the point that I made when I recited that verse from Surah Ibrahim, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that whenever we send prophets to people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we send them to teach in a language of the people to whom they've been sent, not in a language from whom they've been sent. I'm not saying we should jettison Arabic. It is the language of the Quran. It is the repository of the entire wisdom of Islam. But we have been sent here to be the translators and not simply the transmitters of that language. There's a fundamental difference, because Allah says, I've sent prophets, I've instructed them to teach and to speak in the language of the people to whom they've been sent, not the people from whom they've been sent, in order that they may clarify things. If you want to remain obscure, speak the languages of the places from where you originally came. But if you want to clarify things, if you want to be understood, if you want to persuade, if you want to convince people, if you want to make an impact, then you speak in the language of the people to whom you've been sent, like every prophet had that. And sometimes, my respected brothers and sisters, the language is linguistic. But sometimes the language is also cultural. And so, we're not saying, for example, that you must eat haram food. But you will not be invited to a barbecue if you have not also developed a taste for halal barbecue, or invite others to a barbecue that you have. You must enjoy the nasheeds that we sing in Arabic, and the way in which we praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and salute the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Arabic and in Urdu and whichever other language we have. But unless we are also the pioneers of translating that into a cultural form, and sometimes the beautiful melodies of the nasheed may sometimes have to give way to the vibrancy of the musical forms that are available if we are to make an impact and to clarify the deen of Islam to the people that we have been sent to. And so these are absolutely crucial things that I think we need to understand. And so we must have the confidence to speak, and we must have the responsibility to be clear when we speak and to be convincing and persuasive when we speak. And I want to say, particularly after the opening of the Museum of African American History in Washington last weekend, that I believe that we need, particularly through African American Muslims, not to make too fine a distinction amongst Muslims, but I believe that the African American Muslim community has an enormous responsibility to lead us into this quest to embed Islam, to embed the Muslim community, to free it from discrimination, to free it from ambiguity about identity and where we are and what must we do and why are we here, etc. Because we must understand that history that gives us confidence. In 1501, the first Muslim slave was brought to the Western Hemisphere, making Islam the second monotheism that arrived in the Western Hemisphere. Catholicism came in 1492 with Columbus. A decade later, Islam arrived in the shape of the first slaves that have come. 10 to 15% of all slaves in the Western Hemisphere were Muslim. And that gives us the confidence. We have earned our dues, particularly in the United States of America. We can't be perpetual strangers if we understand that history. Life was made tough for Muslims and for Islam in the Western Hemisphere, but particularly in the United States of America. And so when we understand that we have a memory of our past, we must assume leadership, because we must bring to mind a memory of the past that is 500 years old, not only 50, as there may be some who are new, who arrived in the last 50 years from other parts of the world. But as a religion, as a community, Islam has been here for 500 years. We have nothing to apologize for. We must speak with the confidence of having been here for 500 years and being the second monotheism in the Western Hemisphere. We must speak because it was not an easy history, it was a difficult history. But we must speak with the history of our interdependence on others. We would not have survived as people had we not created an interdependence with other slaves, with other communities. Through intermarriage, we have seen that you cannot have the purity of faith when you needed to intermarry. And remember, my respected brothers and sisters, that when they brought slaves, particularly Muslims, they brought mostly Muslim men and very few Muslim women. When Muslim men did marry Muslim women, they broke up the families in order not to have a family system of propagation of Islam. The moment they saw that happening, the children were sent to one place, the mother to another, and the father to another, in order actively to discourage the propagation of Islam. We have within us the DNA of resilience. How did we withstand this and yet come out of it with a memory of our religion? Had our forebears not been resilient, they withstood, they endured, they survived, and they carried forward. And the thing that kept them resilient, my respected brothers and sisters, was a maintenance of the essence of Islam, and sometimes a shift in the form of Islam. We cannot judge them historically for how they did things. They understood the values of Islam, they understood that God existed, and they called God Allah, and they tried to give their children names that speak to the glory and the magnificence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even if the form of worship may have altered over time. They showed them adaptability. And so those of us who come from the outside and we see, for example, the nation of Islam sitting on chairs, and we are tempted to say, what is this? Understand that whatever other problems there may have been with that organization, it came at a critical moment that we would have lost our identity. We would have lost the memory of the God that we worship. We would have lost the name of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had people not adapted in order to keep the resilience going. So we must be gentle with our history and take from it what is the essence of what we carry forward, even as we change to more mainstream forms. African Americans carry with them an ability to manage multiple identities. Often we come from the heartlands of Islam. I'm a Muslim first, I'm a Muslim last. Slave communities like the one in Cape Town where I come from, and the African American one here didn't have the luxury of saying, I will live and die by my one identity of being Muslim. They understood that they were also black because they were treated like blacks. They were also slaves because they were treated like slaves. And they were also Muslim. And so they did not seek to create distinctions between those identities, but complementarity between those identities, because the memory of slavery meant that we will not ever tolerate the enslavement and the oppression and the segregation of any other person. The identity of being black meant that we understood that a darker skin means a harder life, and therefore we cannot stand for it. And the ability to retain our Muslim identity meant that that was the fountainhead of our values. And so, this community that we are calling upon to give leadership is also a community that has witnessed God's mercy. Sometimes our memory of God's anger is overwhelming and we forget God's mercy. Sometimes our memory of God's desire to be worshipped is stronger than the memory of God's mercy. But those who are oppressed, those who went through the phases of slavery, of oppression, of segregation, of exclusion, they have often seen God's mercy at work. Because African Americans remain the poorest segment amongst all Muslim communities. The Pakistanis are right on top in the income brackets. The African Americans are the bottom 30% of the Muslim community in America. So we know poverty, and therefore we know compassion. We have seen the inside of prisons, not for fraud, but for being black, and for being in socioeconomic conditions that were less than ideal. We have felt the brunt of segregation. We have seen our faith shaken and challenged on so many occasions. And on every occasion we have seen God's mercy. And we have extended God's mercy. And that's why some of the most notable recruits to Islam have been in the dungeons of the prisons of this country. And out of that we have understood the need for political activism rather than simply being victims. We have understood a long time ago that unless we are going to stand up as Malcolm X, for example, exhorted us to stand up, not to become victims of history, but to become agents of history and to stand up. That's what we can teach. When so many others may run for cover at the first sign of Islamophobia, we have the responsibility, particularly the African American community, have the responsibility to say, if you think this is Islamophobia, you should have been here 300 years ago, 200 years ago, 400 years ago. If you think this is what will call for a jihad, let us tell you how we resisted this, how we were able to build resilience within ourselves, that unless we first learn patience and resilience, no jihad will ever stand up. Don't show your anger, show your dignity. This is the lesson that America is crying out for. And particularly our African American Muslims must not be defensive about it. We must be able to teach because we've been there, we've done that, and we've seen what is to be thrown at us. The most important thing about the African American community is that they have no other home. We have roots in Africa, but we have no other home. And therefore, when you don't have an exit clause, when you don't have a back door to another home, you've got to make the one you're in work. That's the leadership that will come. Because so many of us will say, no. If Trump becomes president, I'm back I can rather endure what is happening in Iraq. We have understood Islam not as a black and white thing, but often as a choice, as the Prophet ﷺ has advised us, and is a principle in our fiqh, in our jurisprudence. We have understood Islam not as an us and them, an absolute choice, but we have often understood it as sometimes being the lesser of two evils. When you face one difficulty and you have the choice with another difficulty, the responsibility in Islamic jurisprudence is to say, what is the lesser of two evils? And so, this is a particularly important debate in the choices that are coming up in November for you. We may not like everything that one says, but we may have to dislike something else more because of the danger it holds for our country and the world. And that has often been the way in which we've negotiated life as oppressed, enslaved communities. And most importantly, we need this leadership because you speak the language of America. And here I don't mean simply English, because anyone can learn English. It means the cultural inflections. It means the cuisine. It means the way in which people entertain themselves. And we need those to be the front runners as we go forward. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين والمؤمنات إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. قال الله تعالى إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وأصحابه وبارك وسلم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Holy Quran that both Allah and all the angels, they send their peace and their blessings on our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala advises us that you who believe, you too send your peace and your blessings on our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Peace and blessings on our beloved Prophet. Respected brothers and sisters, I thought that I wanted to raise these issues with you because sometimes I think that the members of the African American Muslim community are sometimes too apologetic about their past and don't see in historical context. Sometimes I think we shrink away from leadership when in fact everything in our history has meant that we should give leadership in a moment like this. Sometimes we feel under pressure because those who have come with Arabic on their tongues, come with perfection of their prayers, recite the Quran with the most beautiful melodies and the most beautiful tajweed pronunciations. And we shrink back and we think this is not for us. We are subservient to those who have come over the last 50 years while ignoring the history and the experience and the expertise that we have built up over 500 years as a community. I believe that the United States of America stands at a fundamental crossroads. And I believe that Muslims are in the crosshair. And I believe, with other people, I believe that all the lessons that have been taught have brought us to a moment when this community, the African American community, and that's why it's important to make a khutbah like this at Howard University after the opening of the African American History Museum, that it is time for us to be able to take each other's hand, firstly within the Muslim community, and to say, let us not have false divisions between African American, Arab, or Indo-Pak, or new converts, or new arrivals from Africa. We need to find a working coherence as we go forward, because if we can't unite now, then I believe we will never find a point of unity. If we don't unite in danger, you will not unite in good times. Secondly, we must be able to say, these are the leadership lessons, some of the things that I've spoken about that we offer. And I believe the time has come for that offering to be made. I believe, inshallah, that if you are able to build that coherence amongst Muslims, I believe that you have the credentials, the credibility, and the reach and the access to lead the Muslim community into an alliance and a coalition for virtue. I believe that if we have Muslims who face Islamophobia reach out to Black Americans who face racism, to reach out to Hispanics who face xenophobia, to reach out to women who face misogyny, if we are able to say that our oppression, the prejudice against us is but one manifestation of the prejudice that is threatening the whole of the country. And unless all of us unite against prejudice and discrimination, we will all suffer prejudice and discrimination. I believe that you are uniquely enabled to lead us into that. And so I pray, inshallah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the courage and the confidence to give leadership in this time, inshallah. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the wisdom to be able to understand what is good and what is bad. To understand, inshallah, what is evil and what is a lesser evil, and to give us the courage to make the choices based on some of those things, inshallah. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will rally American Muslims as a whole towards a point of unity, so that being placed in the United States of America, that Muslim Americans will also play their role to safeguard the Muslim world and the Black world and the Hispanic world from the spread of this contagion, inshallah. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار رب يسر ولا تؤسر رب تمم بالخير ربنا زدنا علما وارزقنا فهما وارزقنا بالصالحين والحمد لله رب العالمين إن الله يأمركم بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي وأقم الصلاة